Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Sacred Writings. My name is Jason Damiani, and today I will be going over my 1485 Incunabula Bible. So in this video, I will be discussing my 1485 Anton Koberger Bible. This Bible would be in what's called the Incunabula stage or era of printing. Incunabula is a Latin term meaning swaddling clothes or cradle. And so more specifically, more commonly, it's translated as cradle in the world of collecting. That simply means the earliest stages of the printing press. So any books that would be printed from the year about 1450, 1455, all the way up to 1500. Some people may even push it out to 1505. But I take the more 1455 to 1499 stage being that infancy stage of the printing press. And so any Bible or leaf or any book for that matter that you purchase or may have from 1499 and earlier would be considered an Incunabula Bible or book, meaning infancy stage of the printing press. And so in this video, I'll be going over my Incunabula Bible that I have. It's not a full Bible, it's a set of leaves that I got. I purchased these leaves as a collection of them, the book of Ezekiel, and it's a beautiful leaf, one that I really do love. And as I mentioned, these leaves, or this Bible, would have been printed in 1485 by a man named Anton Koberger, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Nuremberg, Germany. So I'll show you some of the leaves here. Now, this leaf you can see has some beautiful woodcut images. And what a woodcut image is a simply wooden block that would have been etched out or carved to make these really stunning images. And they would obviously etch out that block, they would roll the ink onto it, and then press the paper down onto that block, and then when they pick the paper up, you'd have these really stunning images. This one's really detailed. You'll be able to see more detail in the close-up shots afterward, but I just love the work of this castle here. Obviously, they were taking more of a, for the time of printing, a more modern approach to what Ezekiel's visions may have looked like, specifically of the temple. So back in Ezekiel's time, the temple would not have looked like a 15th century castle, but that is what they did. And so you got a really nice one here. This would have been like the layouts of the temple. You can see like the altar up here. So really beautiful images that they have here. And Anton Koberger is pretty notorious for that. He's one of my personal favorites of the collecting. I have multiple leaves from him, and I'll showcase those ones in later videos. But he does beautiful artwork. A lot of them are really visually stunning, and that's one of the criteria that I personally look for when I go to add something to my collection. Is this item that I'm going to have, is it visually stunning? Because there are a lot of leaves, especially when you get into 1500s and later, where it's simply just, they kind of got away from that artistic aspect of the Bibles and went more to just a text to paper. So they're still really nice to look at, really cool font that they would use, or the format and things like that, but personally, I love those visually stunning images, and I have lots of leaves that I'll be able to show you guys and go into a lot more detail about all of those. But yeah, I have a few more here. This one has a small woodcut image on it. One really cool thing about these leaves is that because the printing press wasn't like our modern printer, you couldn't do different colors and things like that. So any color that you see on any of these leaves would have had to been done by hand. aside from the black letters, of course. But you have what they call rubrications, and the rubrications were typically little notes that were added in, not necessarily notes, but little features that were added in. And so in this particular leaf, you can see, it's maybe hard to see here, but at the beginning of each sentence, there's these small little red slashes. That would be considered a rubrication. And you also have these larger initials that would head up maybe a chapter heading or a new paragraph. And so those all would have been done by hand. So imagine the amount of work that went into this. They had to get the movable type into the printing press. And a movable type are these little tiny metal letters that would have been made by hand and then molded to have these different letters. And you had to have capital letters and lowercase letters and a lot of crazy detail that went into it. And they would have to then line all those letters up in the printing press. It would all be backwards like you would be for a mirror, right? Because you're putting in the printing press and then pressing it down on the paper so that way it's legible or readable when you pull off the printing press. So they would do all that work leading up to it, and then they would have to go through every single page, and someone had to go in and do the little hand rubrications on the beginning of each sentence, and then they'd have to go in and add these beautiful large initials at the beginning of each heading. Now keep in mind too, verses were not added in the Bible at this point. Chapters and verses, as many of you may know, were added much later, so they are not inspired, although they are very helpful. And so at this point they did have chapters, but they didn't have verse breakdowns yet. But as I briefly mentioned, this is from the book of Ezekiel, so I've got many leaves here. I don't have all of them. I just have a small handful of them. You can see how this one is part of a, like they're both together, would have been bound in the book this way, and so each piece of paper would have been this large when they laid it in the printing press, and then they would have pulled out the printer, let this dry, and then they would fold it in half, of course putting it into the binding of the book, and then you would read it. So really, really cool artwork there. But again, this is from the prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel was the 6th century Israelite prophet who was exiled to Babylon, gave his name as the author of the book, right? So Ezekiel the prophet wrote the book Ezekiel, makes sense. His name in Hebrew means God strengthens. Great book, lots of amazing imagery in there, and so you can see a lot of that imagery in the woodcuts, as I mentioned. Now, I like to go into history. I like to provide some background to the particular person, the printing, the leaf. Any information that I can find about it, I try to add that in there. What I will say is that this particular leaf, this set that I have, I'm not going to be exhaustive in it because I have other Anton Koberger leaves that I want to show, and so I'm going to kind of provide maybe more detailed information, different aspects of things as I go through each leaf, rather than doing a full-on documentary, if you will, of these particular leaves. But as I mentioned, it was printed by a man named Anton Koberger, who was born in Nuremberg, Germany in the year 1440, and he died on October 3rd in the year 1513. Of course, all this is AD, in case that needs to be clarified. He is one of the most notable publishers and printers of the 15th century. As I mentioned earlier, he's one of my favorite printers. He's got beautiful printing style, and he himself had 24 printing presses in operation during his lifetime and employed about 100 printers and craftsmen that would run these 24 printing presses. So a pretty big organization. There's a lot more information I can find about him than I can for some of these other printers that I've mentioned in my previous videos. Of course, the more work they would have done, the more notorious they were, the more information you'll be able to find on someone like that. Now, where was it printed? It was printed in Nuremberg, Germany, the place where he was born and eventually died. The city was first mentioned in the year 1050 AD in official records as Nuremberg, but had its origin in a castle known as the Kaiserberg Imperial Castle, built about 10 years earlier by the German King Henry III, or Duke of Bavaria. A settlement eventually developed around the castle, and in 1219 the city was granted its first charter, and so the city soon gained full independence, becoming a free imperial city. Now, if there's any significance or importance to a leaf that I have in my collection, I'd like to tip the hat to that or provide some information on it. And so this leaf is significant, or these leaves rather are significant, simply because of who it was printed by. So this particular Bible, not necessarily important in and of itself, but it is very interesting and very notable because of who it was printed by. What I will say about these leaves is that it was printed on cotton rag paper. It was very thick paper, very durable. You can even hear in the mic here the thickness of it. It was a very strong and excellent paper. It was very good quality. You can see I can even hold it here just by 2 fingers at the bottom. It keeps its shape and its form. So that's one of the reasons that this particular leaf, or these leaves, lasted so long, because it's very heavy-duty paper, great quality, and so it was able to kind of endure throughout those over 500 years in history. And so that's why I have a lot of them in my collection. I love that paper. It's personally, I think that's probably one of my favorite materials that Bible leaves are made of. Vellum or parchment is really cool. Those are the ones that are made of animal skin. I'll talk about those in other videos. They're really cool, but they're much thinner. They are very durable as well. But something about that cotton rag, I love the sound of it, I love the feel of it, I love the thickness of each leaf, and so it's just something that I really enjoy having. So back to what I was saying about the significance of the leaf. Because it was printed by Anton Koberger, it's significant, and because it's in the incunabula era, it makes it a lot more valuable and rare. So that's something that I really do love about it, and these leaves are not impossible to obtain by any means, but they are much rarer, obviously. Something that is approaching 600 years is pretty hard to come by. Now, one thing I also like to mention is how and where did I acquire the leaf, and how much did it cost? I find that to be helpful and interesting, especially if you're interested in getting into the world of collecting. Where can you get these things? How much can you expect to spend? As I mentioned with some of my previous videos, this hobby can be affordable, but can also be extremely expensive, very pricey. So I purchased this set of leaves, or this group of leaves, on eBay. It came from Austria. But I got the whole set for $1,300. Now, I know that's a lot of money, but I got 59 leaves, so that really brought it just about over 20 bucks per leaf, which for these leaves is very, very good. So I really got a good deal on it. It was a buy it now or best offer. They were asking $1,700 for it. I made an offer of $1,200, assuming they would counter offer, but they didn't. They accepted it. The reason why I said $1,300 is because I had to pay for the tax and the shipping for it, which brought it right to $1,300. So I personally count that towards the cost of the leaf, because that's how much money I had to put out for it, and that's how much you can expect to spend for something like this. Now, these don't come around very often, which is one of the reasons I bought it, because it's very rare. Multiple times a day, I'm always looking for new things online, trying to find different types of manuscripts or rare leaves to add to my collection. And so when I saw this, I was like, that's rare, that's interesting, I want that. So it's really cool to have in my collection. I really do enjoy having it. Again, it's a costly hobby, but it's something that is very enjoyable and I find quite interesting, and I love sharing with people, which is why I do these videos. And so hopefully you can share with others and share this video with friends, family, people you may think would be interested in this type of stuff. Please consider subscribing, liking the video, and be sure to stay tuned for the close-up shots after, and I'll see you guys in the next video.